Welcome back to The Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into kind of a cinematic phenomenon that really left its mark on the climbing world and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got some YouTube transcripts and some wiki stuff and all sorts of things. We're going to be looking at the film La vie au bout des doigts.
La vie au bout des doigts.
Which translates to life at your fingertips.
Exactly.
And this film is a lot more than just a climbing documentary.
Yeah. It's considered by many to be like the first true climbing film.
Oh, okay.
Where climbing is actually the focus as opposed to like a means to an end.
Gotcha.
Like, alpinism or something like that.
Okay. So we're not using the climbing to get somewhere.
Exactly.
We are climbing.
Climbing is the goal, yeah.
Climbing is the goal. Okay.
And at the center of all this, there's this charismatic, pioneering figure, Patrick Edlinger.
Edlinger. Now that name, when you just say it, it conjures up images of just sheer rock faces and incredible climbing.
Oh.
Like he's really a pioneer of free soloing, which is climbing without a rope or any protection.
Without anything.
So how did this film, La vie au bout des doigts, how did it come about?
Well, like a lot of things, it started kind of by accident.
Okay.
The first part of it was a climbing session that was filmed at La Piade near Toulon.
Okay.
And there you see Edlinger climbing solo above the water. He's using magnesium carbonate.
Right.
Which is basically helps to absorb sweat and improve grip.
Right. Chalk.
Exactly. Chalk. But, it's important to understand what solo integral actually means.
Right.
Which is free soloing. So it's relying solely on your own strength.
Wow.
And the features of the rock without any artificial aid whatsoever.
Gosh, it's hard to imagine that, I mean, a lot of us, if we're not climbers, we might scramble up some rocks on a hike. But to think that that's what he's doing without a rope or anything is, I don't know, it's hard to even fathom.
Totally. The risk of falling is obviously huge.
Huge, yeah.
But, in La Piade, there was kind of like a natural safety net.
Oh, okay, so there's water below or something.
Exactly. The shallow water below, so it was a good place to kind of train.
Yeah.
To enjoy the movement without the sort of the usual moral constraints.
I see.
Like the psychological aspect of it. Edlinger used to say that he went there often for the sheer pleasure of the movement.
Right.
Without any kind of moral constraint. And, for our listeners, I think that highlights how even in these really extreme endeavors, there can be an element of pure joy.
Yeah.
In the movement itself.
Yeah, because that's kind of what climbing is it's like this physical expression of something.
Totally, yeah.
So from the calm waters of La Piade, we move to Boo.
Yeah.
Which is if you're a climber, that's this, almost sacred name in the climbing world.
For sure.
How did they end up filming at this legendary crag?
So it was actually the director, Jean-Paul Janssen, who discovered Boo, and it was totally spontaneous. He saw Edlinger free soloing these different sections, and he had this intuition to kind of film them and then edit them together.
Gotcha.
To give the impression of one continuous, extremely difficult climb.
Gotcha.
And actually, for the film, Edlinger climbed the Galot Fou, which is a 6B.
Okay.
The roof of DSF, named Stress Flip, a 6B plus Faux.
Oh.
Which, DSF isn't really explained in the materials, but we can kind of deduce from the context.
Okay.
It's the name of the route.
Yeah.
Then the roof of La Beta, which is a 6A plus Faux.
Okay.
And then the final pitch of the Pilier des Fourmis, which is a 7A. So.
Wow. And just to kind of, for listeners who aren't climbers, those numbers indicate difficulty.
Exactly.
And the higher the number,
the harder it is.
The harder it is. So he's going from a 6 to a 7, that's getting up there. So it's a really big jump.
Yeah.
And it sounds like to increase the visual drama, Edlinger didn't shy away from making things even harder.
Intentionally?
In some places, he admitted to intentionally skipping holds.
Oh, wow.
Just to make the movements look more spectacular.
Gosh, it's like he's going for style points.
Totally. Yeah. And, reading some of the accounts, it seems like that choice caused kind of mixed reactions within the climbing community.
Oh, really?
Some people were, impressed. Yeah. Others were kind of
critical.
Yeah, critical. Why are you doing this?
Right. It's risky enough.
Yeah. And there's also a very significant anecdote. The cameraman, worried about Edlinger's safety, actually suggested leaving a rope dangling.
What?
Just in case.
As a backup?
Yeah, just as a backup. And Edlinger just categorically refused.
Really?
Yeah. He said the rope would disturb him and that there was no risk.
So he had this unshakable confidence in his ability.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's remarkable.
So what about the title of the film, Life at Your Fingertips? Where did that come from?
So that was actually an exclamation by the journalist, Jean-Louis Blondem.
Oh, okay.
Seeing the footage, he was so struck by Edlinger's mastery and courage that he just blurted out, "C'est vraiment la vie au bout des doigts."
Oh, wow.
Which is, it really is life at your fingertips.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
And it just became the perfect title.
Yeah.
You know, and for your listeners, I think it shows how sometimes like an off-the-cuff intuition can really capture the essence of an entire project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I know that the music played a big part in the success and the feeling of the film.
Absolutely. The choice of Pyramid by the Alan Parsons Project
Yeah.
was just genius. Like those evocative sounds.
Yeah.
They just fit perfectly with the images. They amplified the tension and the beauty of Edlinger's movements. And if you listen carefully, you can hear how the music actually underscores these moments of exertion and suspense.
It's almost like a soundtrack to the action.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the film was broadcast for the first time in December of 1982.
Yeah.
What was the public's reaction?
The public was totally captivated. Like Edlinger's appearance, with his look and his philosophy, really captured the collective imagination.
Yeah.
You know, an athlete like that defying gravity with such apparent ease.
Right.
And with such a connection to nature. It was something totally new for that time. And, you know, a lot of people online comment about how the film sparked their curiosity about climbing.
Yeah, it really kind of put it on the map, didn't it?
Absolutely.
So speaking of Edlinger's philosophy, what can you tell us about his approach to free soloing? Was it just recklessness or was there something deeper going on?
For Edlinger, free soloing was not an act of recklessness at all.
Okay.
It was the result of meticulous preparation, a deep knowledge of himself, and a really intimate connection with the activity.
Mm-hmm.
He used to say that it was a need that he felt,
Interesting.
not something that he planned in advance.
Yeah, so it wasn't a stunt that he was trying to pull off.
Exactly.
It was something that he had to do.
Exactly. And I think that distinction is really crucial to understanding his motivation.
Yeah. And technically speaking, how did he deal with the physical difficulties of free soloing? Like, for instance, tatanization, which is muscle lockup.
Yeah. Tatanization, or what we often call muscle pump, is the enemy of every climber.
Right.
It's that feeling of loss of strength and muscle stiffness due to the lack of oxygen
Gotcha.
during prolonged exertion on small holds.
Okay.
So Edlinger had developed techniques to counteract this. So he would shift his weight onto his feet
Okay.
to rest his arms.
Gotcha.
He would relax his arms alternately
Okay.
and really focus on his breathing.
Right. So being mindful of his body,
Exactly.
managing his energy resources.
Exactly.
And I imagine at that level, there's a strong intuitive element that comes into play as well.
Absolutely. When the routes become extremely difficult, there's no longer any room for logically thinking about every single move.
You just have to react.
Exactly. You have to trust your instincts.
Right.
Your body's learned reactions, your balance. It's like a kind of dance with a rock, where experience and intuition guide your movements. And Edlinger himself used to compare climbing to a vertical opera. Wow. With the rock dictating the choreography.
That's a great image. It really gives you a sense of the fluidity and harmony that he sought in his movement.
Totally.
Now, what about concentration? I mean, in such a risky activity, that must be crucial.
It's absolutely crucial. Even a slight distraction can be fatal in free soloing.
Yeah.
Edlinger trained to maintain his concentration in unusual ways,
Oh, okay. Like what?
like walking on a chain,
Really?
trying not to lose his balance despite distractions, an exercise that simulates the need to stay focused even in precarious conditions.
Wow. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So physically speaking, what were the most important qualities for Edlinger?
According to him, power in the extremities, like the fingers and toes, was fundamental,
Right.
along with great flexibility, especially in the hips. This flexibility allowed him to pivot better on his feet and distribute his weight optimally.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Another aspect that I'm curious about is the void, the height. How did that affect his solo climbing?
Le gaz, as they call it in French, is a very powerful psychological factor.
Yeah.
The awareness of the height and the lack of resting points can make a climb much more difficult. Edlinger said that he learned to completely ignore the void while climbing,
Wow.
focusing solely on his movements. It was a kind of mental detachment necessary to overcome fear.
Yeah, you have to just be in the moment.
Exactly.
So finally, what was the deeper meaning of climbing for Patrick Edlinger?
For him, climbing was much more than just a sport.
Okay.
It was a way of life. It offered him a profound sense of involvement, an intense sensory experience. He greatly appreciated simple pleasures after a challenging climb, like a glass of water or a sandwich. It was a minimalist and authentic philosophy of life.
Very cool. And so let's get into the impact of La Vie au bout des doigts.
Yeah.
It was an immediate and huge success, right?
A resounding success.
Yeah.
Both in France and internationally. The film even received a César nomination.
Wow.
And, considering the production budget was relatively low, the financial return was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to sales in many countries.
Wow. And the film transformed Patrick Edlinger into a global celebrity. How did he handle that change?
Overnight, Edlinger was thrust into the spotlight. He appeared on the cover of Paris Match. He was voted France's favorite sportsman in 1984.
Wow.
This sudden fame brought with it challenges, upsetting his private life. He admitted that he didn't know that world.
Huh.
He didn't watch TV.
Yeah.
And he was surprised that strangers would greet him and ask for autographs.
He lived a very simple life, it sounds like.
Yeah, very much so.
And the film helped to spread a passion for climbing to the general public. What do you think it was about his message that resonated so much with people?
I think his minimalist philosophy, his ability to appreciate simple things, like he said, a glass of water and a sandwich after a climb, resonated deeply with people.
Right.
In an age of increasing consumerism, his authentic approach and connection to nature were particularly appealing.
Absolutely. And I remember there was another film by Janssen with Edlinger called Opera Vertical.
Yes, it came out the same year, 1982. Opera Vertical showed Edlinger free soloing in the Verdun Gorge with box music in the background. Powerful images, even today.
Yeah.
Like the one of Edlinger climbing barefoot.
Wow.
Maybe less known, but this film offers another perspective on his art.
Yeah, very cool. And despite his image as a free solo purist, Edlinger also participated in the first climbing competitions. Why this change of heart?
Right. Initially, he was part of the Manifesto of the 19,
Okay.
a group of French climbers who were skeptical about competitions.
Right.
However, he participated and won Sportrosia in 1986,
Wow.
and also achieved very good results in the first editions of the World Cup. This shows a certain evolution in his thinking and his willingness to challenge himself, even in a competitive context. Perhaps he saw in competitions a way to push his limits further or to give visibility to climbing.
Yeah, it's a way to take it to the next level.
Yeah, exactly.
So Patrick Edlinger remains a key figure in modern climbing.
Absolutely.
What would you say is his most important legacy?
Edlinger was instrumental in defining free climbing as a separate discipline, separating it from the tradition of mountaineering. His skill, his charisma, and his philosophy have inspired generations of climbers.
Wow.
His tragic death in 2012 left an unfillable void in the climbing world.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, his legacy is an invitation to pursue what you love with passion, dedication, and awareness.
La Vie au bout des doigts was therefore much more than just a documentary.
Absolutely. It captured a unique moment in climbing history, introduced the world to an unforgettable character, and ignited a passion for the sport, thanks to its breathtaking images and Edlinger's philosophy of life.
Reflecting on all of this, it makes me wonder, how does a pursuit of mastery and freedom embodied by Edlinger's free soloing resonate today in other areas of life where risk and reward are balanced? What drives a person to such intense dedication, and what are the broader implications of this choice beyond the specific activity? It's a provocative thought for our listeners who joined us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this was great. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.